The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, what began as an experiment in blending magic with comedy and performance art is now one of the world's hottest viral internet sensations. It's an overnight success story more than 10 years in the making. Meet Lucy Darling, who is just one of multi-talented performer Carissa Hendrix's complex personality. Find out how a grassroots effort called Bisbee Bikeways is already providing for a safer, more socially bonded community in Bisbee and beyond. And meet the filmmaker and the star behind Truth Be Told, a new short Western film that is asking tough moral questions and is starting a discussion that shouldn't end after the credits roll. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. You may have seen them online, an elegant redhead with a classic hairdo and a dazzling array of sequined ball gowns, performing magic and talking to their audience about every subject under the sun, especially romance. That's Lucy Darling, so far the most successful part of award-winning Canadian artist Carissa Hendrix's career, inspired by the wisecracking socialite characters from Hollywood's golden age. I was thrilled to talk to this fire-eating firebrand, a close personal friend of Penn and Teller's, before she headlines the Fox Tucson Theater on April 1st. I started by asking why, in the 21st century, do men still dominate the field of magic when women are often just so much better at
it? Ooh, spicy. Well, one thing you have to keep in mind about magic is that it is extremely difficult. It's hard to get the basics down. Really, what you have to do is spend some time understanding reality so that you can falsify it. And all of the books that teach you how to do that, and I mean all of the books, with like maybe 2 exceptions, that have ever been written about magic, were written by a man with the assumption that a man would read it. For example, natural movement is a huge part of like the higher level of magic, knowing how to stand as if you aren't doing anything suspicious. Meanwhile, you have 14 doves shoved up your nose. And knowing the technique to do that. Now, unfortunately, typically a masculine body will hold themselves differently. And so you do notice that in magic there are women, but they tend to often, especially in the first few years, you see them wear suits. You see them carry themselves in a much more masculine way. There's a reason for that, right? I mean, they are referencing the source material. So unless you are willing, or that you have a natural proclivity towards inventing things and starting from scratch, this is a very difficult place to be in a feminine body. And then on top of that, I mean, I think in many, many ways, the last 20 years, the magic community has done a big turnaround. It's much more welcoming to women. You see, my junior program is like a quarter young girls. Often a magic club will be half young girls. However, you also see there's still quite a lot of gatekeeping. There's still a lot of men who have only ever had to interact with other men in the community. They have very limited experience interacting with women, and usually also people of color or any kind of queerness. And they don't know that they are harboring some sexism because they've never had to confront it. And so when you show up as a woman, they feel uncomfortable or they have a bad reaction, or there are these biases, and they're not bad people, and it's just that this life has been unexamined because they haven't had to work with another woman. They haven't had to have a female co-star. And so often, for me, I spend my time, coaching otherwise very good people, kind, generous, sweet men who don't know what they're saying because they've never had to be careful or notice what they're saying or notice their biases.
I just want to remind you of an answer you gave to a question on stage once as Lucy. Someone in the audience wrote you a note that said Marilyn Monroe or Betty Page. And you dismissed the question and said, it's 2025, we need to stop pitting women against each other. And,
yes, correct.
And that's when I realized I loved your politics. I loved your gender politics. but you give so much advice about relationships to people. Where does that come from? I mean, that seems to sort of be something that comes with the wig because, you have a wisdom about you and the way you advise people when they ask these lovelorn questions. But where do you think that part of Lucy Darling's character comes from?
That's such an interesting question. I believe that my 20s were spent. I mean, I've recently found out, I am a bit autistic. And I think as a result, when I did not know that, I spent a lot of time feeling like things that were effortless to other people, interactions I had, were challenging to me or confusing to me. And so I read, honestly, maybe hundreds of books about being a person and empathy, and was, truly deeply curious. Like, it was my special interest to understand the human condition. And also I suffered from a lot of anxiety, and I read a lot of books on how to process my own anxiety. And performing and touring is a weird life. And, I've been in therapy the whole time. It's just as like a maintenance ritual. So there is like a base knowledge that I, as an artist, can bring to the character. However, because Lucy is built on, in many ways, the work of Dorothy Parker and Eartha Kitt and Zsa Zsa Gabor, those elements were just always going to be inherent to the character. The improvisation, and also getting the balance of when to do it as a joke and when to be genuine. Because you can't do all genuine, you can't do all jokes, right? And you need to be able to tell in the way the question's been asked what the asker is hoping for, and whether or not that's something that the audience also was hoping for. And I needed to focus on that. So I took the magic trick out, and the magic trick part of that routine has never gone back in, because I realized that it does take a lot of my cognitive energy to read the question. And then two things are happening. I am searching my soul for, the Rolodex of every book I've ever read, and what I would say to a friend. And often in my circles of friends, I am the person that is dishing out advice. And then once I have that, then it goes through the Lucy Darling filter. Because whether or not I think that's good advice, Lucy might disagree.
Okay, so Carissa, growing up, I had a kind of fear of circuses and vaudeville and anything that seemed to have that kind of patina of age on it, dealing with entertainment, Meeting somebody who has explored that world on their own and learned sideshow art, were you always drawn to the secrets of the sideshow and wanting to know more about that world, whereas I was running in fear from it?
I think some people go and they love horror movies. Some people jump out of airplanes. Everybody finds a way to practice being uncomfortable. My relationship with sideshow was that. I loved that it was an opportunity to test the limits of my body. It wasn't magic. It was real. And it only works if you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And it was such a cool art form.
The reason I bring up sideshow arts is because you had an entry in the Guinness Book of World Records, and that is so exciting to talk to somebody. Tell people what you were in the Guinness Book of World Records for.
I got an opportunity to work on a world record. When you are a sideshow performer or a circus performer, it is sort of assumed that at some point in your career, you will do this. And the record that I ended up getting was to hold a lit torch in my teeth for the longest anyone had ever done it. The existing record was 1 minute and 32 seconds, and I beat the record at 2 minutes and 1 second.
I told my editor this before the interview, and he said, wow, that's about 2 minutes more than I could have done.
Yeah, it was tough. The thing is with world records are like the way people feel about tattoos. Where after you get one, you're like, well, I might as well get 10 more. So that when you get a world record, sometimes if you're very lucky, you make it into the book. But the book is not a complete account of every existing world record. So I am definitely in the book for that, for I think it's like 2014 issue. There's my face with teeth. My teeth got fire in it. It's me. But I am also in Ripley's for a similar stunt. There's a thing called Record Setter online. I've beat a bunch of Record Setter records. A few years ago, I did another Guinness record where I lit a bunch of torches. using only electricity being passed through the human body. And that is officially my record, but I have the plaque, but it never did make it into the book. So it's an interesting thing because a lot of people who have world records have several world records because every single time you get one, it's sort of buying a lottery ticket to end up in the book. And hilariously, I won the lottery on my first world record. And then after that was I love doing the world records, but never ended up in the book again.
Carissa Hendricks, as Lucy Darling, brings an evening of magic, laughter, and quite possibly love to the Fox Tucson Theater on Wednesday, April 1st. A grassroots organization southeast of Tucson is celebrating a major milestone in their evolution. The city of Bisbee is officially asking for bids for the construction of a shared-use path around the Lavender Pit, the former copper mine you'll see while driving on Arizona State Route 80 near historic downtown Bisbee. The Lavender Pit construction is one of several segments that Bisbee Bikeways is promoting to offer safer bicycling, walking, and other modes of non-motorized transportation in the area. You can learn much more about this effort on Saturday, March 28th at the Pedal Power Festival in Bisbee. Next, Tony Paniagua joins us with two guests who elaborate on the ambitious plans for the area.
Megan Connolly, the executive director of Bisbee Bikeways, and Cato Daly, who is a Bisbee resident. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Megan, let me begin with you. We had you here a little bit over a year ago to talk about this. Can you just tell us what the plan is for people who may be hearing about this for the very first time?
Yeah, so Bisbee Bikeways is a project I started in 2018, wanting to create a network of shared use paths in Bisbee and Naco. We've been working with the City of Bisbee, Cochise County, Arizona Department of Transportation, and Freeport McMoran. We have raised over $10 million now to get this Lavender Pit path constructed, which is the path around the Lavender Pit in Bisbee. And that will be going into construction hopefully in the next couple months. Currently, it's a 4-lane highway, 2 lanes traveling in either direction, and there is no real adequate area for pedestrians or bicycles. There's about an 18-inch sidewalk that goes from Lowell to the Lavender Pit overlook, and then it ends there, and then people have to cross a 4-lane highway to get to a sidewalk on the other side. It's very dangerous. One of the community members, Sergio Lolly, was hit and killed, unfortunately, when he was riding his bike there. And many people I know have been injured seriously, including going into a coma for 3 days. So it's definitely a very dangerous place.
And Cato, when did you first hear about this Bisbee Bikeways, and why are you enthusiastic about the proposal?
I've heard about Bisbee Bikeways several years ago, and it is a very exciting thing to have happen because for the 40 years that I've lived here in Bisbee, we have been wanting to have some kind of a safe passage from Old Bisbee to the rest of the boroughs in Bisbee. And to think that we are going to be able to have a dedicated shared-use path is just it's a game changer. It's going to be so transformational for the city of Bisbee, and I'm super excited to be able to ride my bike to go to the farmers market, to go to Naco, and to go to Safeway.
How big is bicycling in your life, and how long have you been there actively being one of these bicyclists that we sometimes see on the road?
Well, fortunately, where I live in Old Bisbee, it's pretty easy to get downtown, and as I've gotten older, it's easier to bicycle now, and I do have an e-bike, and I bike to the pool, and I bike to music practice, and I bike to my sister's house. So I jump on into the post office. I jump on my bike as often as I can in Old Bisbee, but I will not bicycle. Actually, I have bicycled around the pit. I used to bicycle out to Cochise College when I was taking classes there. But it's too scary. As Megan was saying, people have been hit and people have been killed. And it just makes my skin crawl to see people still bicycling around the pit. But I rely on my bicycle here in Old Bisbee.
Are there any communities that you like to point out to as far as accessibility when it comes to pedestrian areas and bicycling that you would hope to emulate?
Well, Sierra Vista has got a wonderful network of shared use paths, and Tucson as well. And when people come back from those communities or go for a weekend in Tucson, I have a friend who just says, "Oh my gosh, I'm on that bike path all the time." And so to have something like that in Bisbee and to add us to this sort of a network or a necklace of these different bike-friendly communities, I think is just a given that's something that we really need to do.
It's a huge amount that could flow into our community because of recreational tourism. I mean, that's $1 billion industry in Arizona, I think, alone. Just putting us on the map as a recreational community is really going to change the effect on how many tourists we have. It's also just great for the people that live there. It's going to improve our quality of life. But with that economic development, hopefully more jobs will come to the area.
Megan, you've been at this since 2018. What drives you? What keeps you going? Because you're dealing with a lot of different issues, factors, people, organizations, and so on.
The reason I started this initially because my daughter was born in 2017, and I actually felt this crushing weight of climate change, bringing a new person into this world. And so what could I do, as one person facing such a massive issue, was to create alternative options for people so they didn't have to drive cars. So my children remain my inspiration, but also I think that I just love a challenge. And every time somebody tells me I can't do it, it makes me want to do it even more. So I think that's part of it. The desire to crush that. It's a huge endeavor, and it's been a big weight on my family, and they're in support of it, but we don't know how long we can do it. The more funding we get, so if people can help out, our website is bisbeebikeways.com, and any support is appreciated.
Cato, and then I'll just wrap it up with you. You've been there for several decades in Bisbee. You love to ride your bicycle. What would be your dream if you had a magic wand as far as the community moving forward when it comes to bicycle access, pedestrian access, and alternative modes of transportation?
Well, to echo Megan's wishes, my magic wand would be that we would have the funding to go forward and develop this 27 miles of shared use paths so that anybody in Bisbee, from people with strollers, little kids in strollers, and kids going to school, residents, people going to work, visitors, could all use the shared use path to get where they wanted to go without having to get into a vehicle and rely on their vehicle. It would make Bisbee a safer place. It would make Bisbee a lot of fun, more fun than it already is, which is hard to imagine. And it just would make people increase their fitness. We have an older community, and having the ability to just take a stroll without having to get into a car would increase our health.
Megan Colony, Executive Director of Bisbee Bikeways, and Cato Daly, a Bisbee resident who loves to ride her bicycle in town. Thank you very much for joining us.
The Pedal Power Fest is Saturday, March 28th, beginning at 10 a.m. at the Jonquil Motel at 317 Tombstone Canyon Road in Bisbee. Volunteer-ridden bicycles will provide the power for the music and other activities. For more information about Bisbee Bikeways or the City of Bisbee's bid postings, we'll have links on our website, the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Truth Be Told is the name of a new short Western film that makes its debut on streaming this month. It's influenced by the classic 1891 Ambrose Bierce short story and the subsequent Twilight Zone episode, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Filmmaker and actor Peter Reese joins me now to talk about the movie, joined by one of the film's stars, actor Jimmy Stewart, who plays a cowboy named Ezekiel, hired to do a very dirty job. that brings him into conflict with his own conscience and his understanding of how divine justice may work on this earthly plane.
Being a good director requires knowing what you want from the performance. So rather than trying things, I need to say, in the case of working with Jimmy, I said, I want a man who is angry, who is self-righteous in his sense of needing revenge, and that there is little leeway, but just a little leeway in his moral compass.
I think that the best part about a good director is just that. They give you a direction and what they expect of you, and you know what to do. My favorite part about acting is great direction, because I'm a good listener and I'm going to take what I've been told and bring it to life. So I think that's the greatest part about having a hands-on director.
You know, in the case of this particular film, truth be told, working with Jimmy and the other actors, we had to create a setting. We had to create an emotional moment or a series of emotional moments. My job as director is not just to describe that moment, but I need to be feeling that moment too. Because otherwise, I'm sitting back in a chair saying, well, be like this, be like that. So it's a combination. And the fact that I was acting in it also, Jimmy and I could have interplay from one character to another to set the mood. But just to having them imagine what it looks like and then be that, I think you're asking too much when you're on set and under time pressure.
Jim, your character in this short is very stoic. You really are holding the emotions in check and guiding the story through your reactions to the other characters. What was your main motivation or the principle that you adhered to the most when creating Ezekiel?
I think it was the pain, the deep pain that the character had from how he had gotten to where he'd gotten. It didn't appear from the reading and what I was getting that this was a happy individual, that he'd had a good path there, that it had been real difficult. And he's trying to find a way to make it through the circumstances that the cards he's been dealt, so to speak, which in most cases he was losing. He'd been losing the entire time that he'd been on the plane. And so from what I gathered from it, I was trying to convey that aspect of it while also maintaining the cool and calm that was necessary to not give it away all at one time. Because as the character grew and evolved, the softer side of him came out. And so it was interesting to try and maintain that, to be, like you said, stoic, but at the same time with an edge, but also at the same time have some conscience.
Peter, you and I are veterans of this game, and you mentioned an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge as an influence on this film. And that resonated with me instantly as a Star Trek fan, or rather, that resonated instantly with me as a Twilight Zone fan. But a lot of our listeners aren't going to have a frame of reference for Owl Creek. So how would you describe the influence that the short story and the film had on creating this film of yours, Truth Be Told?
The idea that you're into a moment, you're just transported into a moment, and that life and death decisions have been made or are being made. And how do each of the characters respond to that? Really powerful. But also, Mark, I looked at, this is a story about a man who's already been judged as being guilty of being a collaborator. Well, what happens if you've had somebody in that same situation when it isn't so obvious whether or not they should be executed? And I like the idea of taking the certainty of this execution about to happen, but introduce doubt. And that's also where the 12 Angry Men comes in. And my character, his job is to introduce doubt into that scenario.
How much of a conscious choice was it to keep the identity and the character of the condemned man kind of out of the focus of the film? I mean, we see a lot more of Jimmy as Ezekiel in the first half of the film than we ever see of the man who's convicted of the crime.
The goal there was to not give much information and to show that the judgment that was passed on him over time was based on very little information. And so it became more obvious that they said, well, this guy's here. We're out to get the people who have stolen our boss's horses. he's available, we're not going to really think much about it. And so the idea that we pass very quick judgments, that's why he's not giving him much information, because there really isn't much information to give because he had so little to do with what was happening.
Okay, for this question, we'll start with James and we'll go to Peter. I'd like to know about how faith and religion might have influenced the story or your role in the film.
Interesting. There was a point when I was auditioning, and there's a certain segment in the script where it talks about a woman and a child in the field, and they just drop, and slaves crying out to God to take them rather than make them suffer one more day. And for me as an African American, it was easy to go back to that because that's a place I was raised at. Those are lessons that my mother taught me long, long ago. And it was purely based to build faith in you, to let you see that you have strength in places you don't know you have strength. You can overcome things that the average human being wouldn't even be able to compromise or contemplate. And so that's kind of where my character developed from right there. I was able to get that part and use that part and build out of that, because no matter how many times I read the script, when I got to that part, it stopped me every single time. And I was out in that field with that woman and that child every single time I read it.
The idea of justice and mercy is something that's been growing in me as I've done work internationally. My wife and I work actively with the refugee community. And I've been in situations where seeing justice and mercy lived out is the exception, not the rule. And it seemed to me that those principles are so timeless, and yet we need to be reminded of them, and not purely based on current events, but it's really hard to say to somebody, well, don't think about justice and mercy. That's passé, that's optional. And so, Mark, the more we worked on this, the more we worked on the script, we said, these are important things to carry into the future. And showing it in the past is a good way to say, wait a minute, this is not a new idea. This is not a political idea. This is an idea based on principles and truth that are timeless. I want the audience to know that their struggles to find a place of safety, of sanctuary in life is very real, and that there are going to be challenges that confront them that test them on whether they will be just and merciful. And I would encourage them to think about not just the times that people have done them wrong, but is there a time when you can do somebody right? There's something that happens in the film that is part of Jimmy's character that really struck him. We had a screening for cast and crew. Jimmy, why don't you talk about that, how that hit you?
So as we had talked about, based on the time period and everything pertaining to, where we're filming at the late 1800s, just after slavery. And so one of the things that in my rehearsing, I didn't, I'm rehearsing my lines. I'm into my character. I'm not thinking about all the physical attributes that the individuals had to go through at that time, including the slaves and the branding and the marking. So when we were doing this, we had a brand on my hand, and I won't tell you what the marking was. I won't give it up. But when we got it, I'm looking at it. I'm not really thinking about it too much. I'm just trying as hard as I can not to mess it up. But I'm not thinking this is going to be a main part of the story. Well, apparently this was something that was significant back in the 1800s. All the slaves were marked with their brandings. And so when we were doing the pre-screening and the filming, we got a good caption of that where it kind of held on the screen for more than 5 seconds. So while it's on the screen, I'm looking at the screen, and then all of a sudden I take my eyes off the screen and I look through the audience, and everybody is fixated on this scar. It's like the entire room in the movie just stopped for a second because the significance of what the scar meant. Not just to myself, but to everyone else that was involved in it. And I didn't realize something that small could be that big, but it was.
Peter, can you share with me how the listening audience can interact with this film?
Starting mid-March, they can go to truthbetoldfilm.com, and they'll have access to the film, no charge. I also have for groups, church groups, school groups, community groups, a discussion guide. And part of the plan is to go on the Justice and Mercy Tour through the end of this year to be available to groups to talk about justice and mercy and the backstory of the film.
Peter, director, writer, actor, truth be told. Jimmy, actor, superstar, truth be told. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM and is posted weekly at azpm.org. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Sarah Ariano. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
This has been an original production of AZPM News.